All right, so welcome everyone. I'm so happy to have you all here with me today. My name is Emily Ann Opala. I'm the Knowledge and Research Lead here at the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health. And today we're talking about motivational interviewing. Before we get started, I'd like to just do a brief land acknowledgement. So I'd like to start off today acknowledging that we're all viewing and participating in this webinar on traditional territories of Indigenous people of Turtle Island. And for me, to recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land since time immemorial. It's really important to understand the longstanding history that's brought you to reside on this land and to seek to understand your place within that history. So I'm coming to you all from Treaty 13 territory, which is collectively known as the Toronto Purchase, and is the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and now many other Métis and First Nations peoples. I invite you all to take some time today to think about how the content of today's webinar is relating to the support that we can give to Indigenous students and our Indigenous peers. With that said, just a little bit of housekeeping for the rest of today's session. Closed captioning is available at the bottoms of your screen. You can turn that on or off using the CC button. There is a chat function also at the bottom of your screen, and that's for discussing thoughts and reactions. Just to start us off today, I'd love to hear from folks what they're most excited about learning about today in the chat. So feel free to share your name, maybe where you're coming from, and what you're most excited about learning today. There's also a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So that function is for submitting questions to our panelists today. And I'll be collecting all those Q&As, and then we'll have a 15-minute question and answer period at the end of today's session. The recording will be available on our website post-webinar within a couple of hours. And the slides will be available as well on our website. So if you're looking for the slides, we'll have those available. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to April Trewhitt.
Hi, everyone. So my name is April Trewhitt. I'll just do a quick introduction. I currently manage an addictions program at Canadian Mental Health Association Toronto branch. I've worked in the mental health and addictions field for about 20 years, which feels a little unreal. I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I also do some private practice. And thanks, Emily, for the introduction. I mean, when I think about motivational interviewing, it's a huge topic. I'm excited to sort of share some things that I think will be relevant to the work that you do. I'm going to just pull up my PowerPoint and we will get started. So motivational interviewing. So today we're going to look at a couple of things. The origins of motivational interviewing. It started out in the 70s. It's by Milner and Rolnick, and it had a really close relationship with the stages of change model that I think probably many people are familiar with. So in its origins, it was very focused on working with individuals that use substances. And since then, there's been a lot of adaptations. You can find motivational interviewing in many sectors of healthcare, of education. It's, when Emily and I were talking about this, I think it's motivational interviewing is a great sort of conceptual framework to use with students. And so when we think about the origins of motivational interviewing, there was definitely some skills and techniques, and recently in the 3rd edition of motivational interviewing, helping people to change, Miller and Rolnick sort of spent a lot of time talking about, am I being the MI spirit? Am I being a way actually to engage with people, a way to interact, to be, to support people. And they really sort of highlighted that piece. And so in some of the changes in the recent edition of motivational interviewing, they sort of took some steps away from the stages of change and talked about thinking about behavioral change in terms of 4 processes. There's an engagement phase, there's a focusing phase, there's an evoking phase, and then there's a planning phase. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some skills that relate to those phases. And then one thing that I wanted to highlight is something called the writing reflux. So when we think about engaging with students, when we think about engaging with individuals, we want to be aware of this writing reflux, because that can really impact whether we're in the spirit of MI. And then today we'll look at some MI skills. And I imagine most of you are familiar with sort of the traditional MI skills, which is called OARS. And we can sort of, use the visualization of a canoe and oars. And oars are open-ended questions, our affirmations, our reflections, and our summaries. The other piece in terms of why motivational interviewing, I think it fits nicely with other therapeutic modalities. At CMHA Toronto, I also sit in our dialectical behavior therapy team. In private practice, I use emotion-focused therapy, and it's interesting how MI really embeds nicely with other therapeutic modalities, including cognitive behavior therapy. So there has been some, variations on the definition of what is motivational interviewing. And so the most current definition is that motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. And when we think about the challenges around change, we know that change is not linear. Change, change has flow to it. Some people experience a lot of barriers to change. And when we think about motivation, again, motivation is not linear as well. We know that motivation sort of ebbs and flows, and there are things that we can do with the students that we work with or with the individuals that we're supporting to kind of increase their motivation, recognize their own internal resources, or help them with resourcing to enhance their motivation. There's definitely a lot of things we can do in terms of embodying motivational interviewing as a way to be with people. I really like this, this sort of statement. So one of the frameworks of motivational interviewing is that we know that people are more likely to change if they have options. And so MI uses this concept of a menu of options, and I've got a video that we're gonna watch, and it's called agenda setting. And probably many of you use this concept of agenda setting. But we know that when there are a number of things that people are struggling with, or people want to make changes to, when we're able to help them narrow in and kind of focus on a couple, they're more likely to be able to make changes in those areas. And we know that, people are more likely to make changes if they have some choice. So really thinking about, in your sessions with students, in your sessions with individuals, thinking about this choice piece. And then I think I mentioned before, when people can focus on one thing, that can increase commitment, that can increase motivation. This is a funny slide. At CMHA Toronto, we have an advanced motivational interviewing training. It's a 2-day training. We also pair it with some supervision. And so when the MI trainers at CMHA Toronto were listening to people's tapes, it does feel like when people are embodying the MI spirit, the conversation has flow. So the metaphor is, it's kind of like dancing, that there's flow, that even if we sometimes miss the mark or have a misstep, we're still able to find our rhythm and work with the flow, as opposed to wrestling. Motivational interviewing is not wrestling. And sometimes, when we're working with individuals that have a lot of struggles, it's easy to get polarized, or it's easy to feel like we might have to convince people into change. And so there's some strategies in motivational interviewing where, you know, we use reflections, we use complex reflections, amplified reflections, double-sided reflections to help like people sort of convince themselves of change. So we want people to sort of make the arguments themselves with our guidance. And I'll explain this as we go. So this is probably one of the bigger changes in the newest edition of motivational interviewing. So Miller and Rolnick really talk about, you know, if there's a couple of things, I don't want to say one thing, if there's a couple of things that you can take away from today's webinar, it's thinking about this spirit of MI. And so they like the acronym PACE. So it's thinking about, you know, how are we working in partnership with the students that we're supporting? And when we're working in partnership, we can think of terms, you know, of being with someone, collaboration, and MI views people as experts on themselves, experts on their own experience. And it's our role in the helping profession to help evoke or elicit people's inner resources. The other part of this PACE acronym is acceptance. And so Miller and Rolnick were heavily influenced by Rogerian theory, Carl Rogers, like thinking about acceptance, and acceptance includes autonomy, really highlighting that people have the choice to make decisions for themselves. They may be choices that, you know, that we as providers may not make, or they may be choices that have some consequences that are really impactful, but people at the end of the day sort of have autonomy. And so one of the metaphors, you know, my team uses at CMHA is that at the end of the day, you are in the driver's seat. You know, sometimes staff are acting in a coaching role. Sometimes staff are, you know, in the back seat and just observing and listening. But the individual is the driver. In terms of acceptance, we're thinking about, you know, using accurate empathy. So really trying to slow things down and trying to convey that we're doing the best job we can to really understand where people are coming from. And then compassion, really working from a compassionate framework, understanding that change is difficult, and oftentimes people have to make changes that you know, that are going to require a lot of resourcing that they may not want to make, but coming from that compassionate, empathetic stance. And then E is evocation. Again, one of the roles of using MI is to really look at strategies to kind of evoke, you know, what's within. So evoking change talk, evoking reasons to make change. So using a lot of evocation to help people think about what solutions there might be, what ideas there might be. And we're going to talk about using a skill in evocation around when we're giving information. So this is an interesting one. It's funny, when I agreed to do this webinar, I also oversee some smoking cessation programming at CMHA Toronto, and the Center for Addiction and Mental Health is one of our partners, and they actually have a webinar next week all about this writing reflux. I imagine some of you may have heard of the writing reflux, but the writing reflux is when we're not working in partnership with someone. And I would, I've sort of named it as, I feel like sometimes this writing reflux is kind of a dilemma when we're supporting people. And so the writing reflux is recognizing when we have the urge, or when we're engaging in activities where we're trying to fix situations, or when we're trying to come up with all the reasons for change, when we're coming up with all the solutions. recognizing the urge to be the problem solver. And it's not that, it's not that this writing reflux says that, our job isn't to support people, to think thoughtfully about options, to help people figure out options, but we want to recognize when we're sort of taking on that role. We want to be aware of this writing reflux, because in motivational interviewing, when we think about the things that help people make changes, it's having choice and control, and sometimes we can do things that inadvertently impact whether someone's making choices. So really, when we think about this writing reflux, we want to sort of take some pauses and think, am I feeling the urge to just say, do this? We can say, have you ever considered this? What would it be like? Would you like some suggestions? But we want to recognize that the situations that people come to us with are not ours to fix. And sometimes this can be freeing. We spend a little bit of time in the longer training that my work does, really helping people think about, what does that mean for you working with people? What does it mean to have this urge to fix? Because it kind of goes against sometimes what we're taught in the helping profession, that our job is fixers. Our job is to be the problem solver. And MI says our job is to support people and guide them in figuring out the fixes or figuring out how to solve problems. But oftentimes we know that staff can feel a sense of burnout or feel like a tremendous weight when we feel like we have to fix things. And we can sort of go back to this when we talk about some strategies that sort of counteract this writing reflux. So as I mentioned before, motivational interviewing it's got these 4 processes, and people can, so kind of like the stages of change. I mean, the engaging process would probably be similar to the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage. The engaging process is really around that building connection, building rapport. So I liked this slide, and that am I engaging with MI style is to sort of, try as much as possible to have presence with undivided attention. I know that sometimes this can be easier than other times. Sometimes, we've got, a lot of people to see. We've just dealt with a crisis situation. So sometimes, it might be taking a pause and really trying to have some undivided attention. Miller and Rolnick, talk about how important it is to sort of try to embody this sense of deep interest, and we can have deep interest with eyes, ears, and heart, because we know when we sort of elicit feedback from people who are getting support, they can identify that when they really felt seen, heard, they often feel valued. So when we're really having an undivided attention, when we're looking with our eyes, when we're listening with our ears, Miller and Rolnick would say when we're listening with our heart, that can really go a long way to building rapport. And then having a dash of curiosity. Similarly to dialectical behavior therapy, this curiosity piece can really help us engage with people. This, I think, is especially helpful when we're engaging with students. Having that curiosity to think about, and why is this so important? Why might there be an urgency right now around this issue? Even this dash of curiosity around, why they might be coming, what's happening, what are the good things that are happening in their lives, what are some of the challenging parts. And then Miller and Rolnick talk about silence inside and outside. Sometimes we know that, and when we're working with people, sometimes there's this pressure, and this is sort of tied to the writing reflux, where we feel like we have to fill the silence. And sometimes we're using reflections and we're taking those pauses. We're letting our words, our interventions sort of sit with someone and having a sort of leaning into silence a little bit more. Again, compassion. And in MI, we're using a lot of encouragers. I see, go on, what else, tell me more. When, when they're coding tapes to see if people are using motivational interviewing, they're actually looking at, how much time an individual has spoken as opposed to the clinician or the staff person speaking, sorry. And so sometimes those encouragers can just help in session for people to explain more. I don't know if people have heard about this Readiness Ruler. I think it's a tool that that's used in CBT. I think it's a tool that's really helpful. So the Readiness Ruler is getting people to think about importance, confidence, and readiness on a scale. So oftentimes at my work, we use the scale of 0 to 10. Sometimes people use a scale of 0 to 100, and we can use this Readiness Ruler in a multitude of ways. We can use a Readiness Ruler on, what would you rate your mood on a scale of 0 to 10? In terms of MI, we're thinking about using this in terms of importance, confidence, and readiness. And we know that when something is important, that's gonna help people be in a phase closer to wanting to act on making some changes. So it's going to increase the readiness. We know that confidence really affects our sense of our abilities. If we feel confident in our abilities to manage something, we're more likely to take the steps forward. So using the Readiness Ruler might be like having people visually describe how important is this change on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident you are, and how ready you are. How ready are you to sort of take this information and apply it, or how ready are you to take the next steps? And again, we know that sometimes people respond when they've got a visual cue instead of just a cognitive cue. I'm sure people are sort of aware of this decisional balance. So decisional balance kind of helps people think about what are the good things about status quo. And status quo is another term for saying things staying the same. So what are the good things about staying the same? What are the advantages of just sort of continuing to do what you're doing? And what are the not so good things about the status quo? So we're getting people to sort of vocalize and think about, what's good about things right now and what are some of the disadvantages. And then we're getting people to think about, what are some of the good things about making a change? What are the pros and what are some of the less good things? And the idea with the decisional balance, we use this sort of in the focusing stage. To get people thinking about, what are some of the pros and cons, and to get people to vocalize, to really be able to vocalize, one of the good things about something that might be harmful or something that might not be working for me is this. And some of the less good things about it is this. It allows people, to sort of think about things in a broader perspective. Dialectical behavior therapy uses the terms pros and cons. But we don't want, sometimes the decisional balance can actually, it can give us some information about what's happening for people. And sometimes it can actually increase sustained talk. And again, sustained talk is just talk that sort of signifies reasons for staying the same. So we want to be mindful of when to use this decisional balance or not. So oftentimes the team that I work with, we use it when we're engaging with people initially to get a sense of where things are at, to sort of have conversations where we're getting a more descriptive picture of what's happening for them. But we don't always go back to this when people are making changes, because sometimes there's a lot of reasons for things to be the same. So in motivational interviewing, there is 3 styles of focusing, and I think I made some reference to this before, and I think this is an interesting one. So when we think about, embodying a spirit of motivational interviewing, the metaphor that Miller and Rolnick use, and the metaphor that that I like to think about, and maybe it's relevant as we're approaching a long weekend, is to think about being on a lake in a canoe with someone. And you can find another metaphor if that metaphor it doesn't work or doesn't feel appropriate. But when we're working with individuals, ideally, we want to primarily be a guide. We want to be in that canoe and help people, think about, where they want to go, what baby steps or what little steps they want to take. We want to help people think about short-term goals versus long-term goals. And our role really is a guide where we've got some expertise, and we've got expertise. We may have resources, we may have access around navigating resources. So we're sort of in this guiding perspective where we're sort of focused on, building some momentum, thinking about, direction, helping people focus, sort of, one thing at a time. Sometimes we're working and following. So sometimes when we're seeing individuals, and I imagine many of you that are working with students, sometimes we're primarily being in the following a style where we're sort of getting a picture. So Miller uses the metaphor of a puzzle where someone's coming to us and we're thinking about all the puzzle pieces that are in their lives, and we're helping them figure out what are some of those priorities. And we're going to look at a skill around agenda mapping that can really help. So following is a lot of listening, and is a lot of sort of rapport building, making sense of. And then sometimes we are in directing when individuals come to us that might be engaging in behaviors or engaging or in situations that have harm to them. So, at CMHA Toronto, sometimes our staff are taking the directing role and are having to call our crisis team, or having to explore, making a phone call to Child Protective Services, or making making calls around ensuring that there's safety for people. So we are in the directing role when there is a safety concern. So we're going to watch a video, and I really like agenda mapping, and I imagine many of you do this without realizing it. But agenda mapping is this idea of helping people focus. And so sometimes in sessions, staff of mine will literally give a piece of paper to someone. They'll say, draw some circles. The staff will have a piece of paper with some circles, or a staff will just have a notebook. And we're getting people to prioritize all the things that they want to talk about today, all the things that are going on. We're sort of putting it on this, on this form, and then we're picking 1, 2, or 3 things that we could focus our attention on in the session, so that it feels like we're able to build some momentum. And again, we know with commitment and motivation, when people have a couple of things to focus on, they're more likely to feel a sense of mastery, to feel like they can make some changes. But when there's so many things going on, it's really hard to sort of develop a focus for the session. So I'm just gonna get out of this and then go to the video. So this is a video from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, their tobacco cessation program. I think it's a really strong video. Hope that it highlights how helpful this is. One second. Okay, let me just figure out what I'm doing.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for coming in today.
No problem.
I saw that your doctor made the referral, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and make that appointment.
Yeah, it's a bit of an inconvenience, I'd say, but I'm here though.
So you made it in here, and do you have a sense of what some of the doctor's concerns were that led her to refer you?
I don't know, something about changing my life even more. You know, the smoking's been changed, and now it's, you know, cut down the drinking, get rid of those extra smokes, get rid of my dog. I don't know what else I have to do. Yeah.
So your asthma has been acting up, and there's a lot of stuff, not just the asthma going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of stress too. My wife's still on maternity leave. She's not getting paid. She's with the baby right now, and I'm the only person that's working right now, and plus I got to change all these things that are going on in my life. Yeah, it's a lot.
Almost overwhelming, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is overwhelming. It is.
Well, we have about, I guess, 15 or 20 minutes together, and I wonder, would it be okay if we took a couple of minutes and just kind of looked at all of the different things that are going on for you, and maybe you can let me know what would be the most helpful to spend some time on?
Yeah, it just feels like everything's all over the place, but I guess we got to start somewhere.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we use are these, it's kind of like a worksheet, and it's an agenda setting worksheet, basically. So if you were to list all of the different things that people around you are saying that you need to work on or you need to change, what would some of those things be? And Sal, just because we write them down here, it doesn't mean that you have to change them. It really, you're in the driver's seat, so it's just to kind of put all the cards on the table, so to speak.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good, as long as I'm not changing anything. And we're just kind of putting, I guess, pen to paper or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so my asthma.
Okay, so asthma is one.
Yeah.
What else?
The fact that they want me to get rid of Oscar, that's my dog.
So your dog and the doctor is saying the dog's...
He's saying it's a main contributor to my asthma problems.
Okay.
Which I don't buy it, and I can't just get rid of him like that, but it's something that's there.
That's pretty shocking to be told that you have to get rid of your dog.
Yeah, the dog's been there before my wife. I know, I've had him longer.
So that's a huge stress right now.
Yeah, it's a big stress. It's like my best friend. So that's one of the important things. Also, I guess cutting down these last cigarettes I've been working on.
Okay, so smoking and working towards quitting completely, sounds like that's a goal for you.
Finances is a problem right now too.
So money.
Time, I gotta come to all these appointments, and I'm taking time off work, which obviously is the money factor, right?
Right. So the appointments and time, and some of these things are kind of related to each other. I think we're already seeing.
Yeah, there's something going on, and also my drinking. I gotta cut down my drinking too.
Okay, wow. So there's a lot happening right now. Sal, anything else that's concerning you?
It's just overwhelming when you see everything there, you know?
Well, so where would you, I mean, if you had to pick somewhere, one or two kind of high priorities or things to talk about in our time this morning, where would you want to start?
I think the thoughts about the dog has been definitely bothering me. That's been one.
Okay.
And my asthma is out of control too, so maybe those two?
Okay, and those are ones that are pretty related to each other, sounds like. Okay.
Yeah, I really like that video because I think it really highlights how people come to us with a multitude of things that they want support with, and how sometimes, you know, when we're seeing people one time, when we're seeing people a couple of times, we can feel really overwhelmed. And you know, they can feel really overwhelmed. So that video, I think, highlights how helpful it is to just narrow in the focus, both for the individual and both for the staff. Narrow in the focus, and then start, you know, and then sort of work on those priority areas, and then get to those other things later. I'm just going to share. I have a couple more things I want to talk to before the question and talk about before the question and answer period. So let me just quickly share. This, whoops, I'm doing the wrong thing here. 1 second. Yeah, so the agenda mapping can be really helpful. The other piece I wanted to highlight was this piece around when we give information to people. So we talked about this writing reflux, and it makes sense. Oftentimes when we're giving information, we're not always asking permission. We're sort of assuming that people are coming to us, and and oftentimes our assumptions are correct. But MI sort of looks at taking it a little bit further, and when we ask permission, it really highlights that we're working with someone, we're working in partnership. So it's been a big change for my staff, but my staff are trying to be more conscious of asking permission before they share suggestions, before they give information, or before they share what has worked for other students. So the example is, do you still want information on the anxiety the anxiety group we talked about at our last visit? And then sometimes we follow up on a scale of 0 to 10. How likely is it that you will attend this group? Or what will you do with it? So then you're sort of asking permission, and then you're following up with a commitment strategy. So this is a subtle shift that Miller and Rolnick talk about that goes a long way, that really allows people to feel like we're working more in partnership. And it's interesting. I mean, I also have used it myself, and sometimes people say, no, I know we're talking about this, and I actually don't want. I don't want to hear what's worked for other people. I don't want this. I don't want information about this possible referral. So it's really helpful as a staff too, because sometimes when we're seeing people over multiple visits, if we haven't asked permission, we may make a fair assumption that we gave them something and that they followed up. And then when they come back, there's a sense of defeat or pressure from them on their part. And there might be a sense of defeat on your part, wondering why. I wonder why this person didn't follow up. So asking permission can really, it can give us an idea of where people are at in terms of readiness. And it can also highlight working in partnership, and it can strengthen commitment. The other piece I wanted to highlight today was just this concept of evocative questions. So when we're helping people make changes, we want to ask questions that directly identify reasons for change. So these types of questions that I'm going to show sort of guide the conversation a little bit more to change. So some evocative questions, and I'm sure many of us use these, getting people to elaborate more. Again, the idea with motivational interviewing is that we're having people literally talk themselves into change. Give me an example. How else would that affect you? Why would you want to do this? Tell me more about this. DBT uses this querying extreme. So we look at, what are the best and worst case scenarios? So what if you continue, what if things continue as they are? What do you imagine might be the worst things that could happen? Or imagine for a minute that, like in that video we saw, that Sal was able to figure out how to keep his dog Oscar and control his asthma. What might that look like for him? How might that help his stress? There's another one is looking back. What were things like before? What were you like back when? Looking forward, this goes to some solution focused questions around that miracle question. If you were to have a week off from your problems, what would you do first? Tell me how you would like things to turn out for you in 5 years. I feel like actually is maybe a little bit too large of a time frame, but turn out in a month, 6 months, a year. And then we know that when we think about behavioral change, we are developing some discrepancy between where people are at right now and what their short-term and long-term goals are. And we know that goals often embody values. So sometimes, taking some time to get people talking about, what are important things for them, what are important values, what are important goals. How do you live out that value in your life? That can really help elicit some change talk. I'm just going to go through this quickly because I know we're a little bit pressed for time. So these are some of the standard MI skills. So again, it's thinking about, with that rowboat, if we don't have oars, we don't have movement. So using open-ended questions, affirmations is another word for validations, using reflective listening skills, and trying to use some summaries really helps that boat have movement. And movement matters. Movement helps create some momentum, and it helps people feel like things are shifting, even if things are shifting slowly. So sometimes we want to think about our open-ended questions, kind of, being connected to, they call it darn language, so desires, abilities, reasons, needs. So these are just some examples. So just, open-ended questions help people elaborate more. So we want to try as much as possible to avoid using closed-ended questions, yes or no questions, and use more open-ended questions. Affirmations, Miller and Rolnick spent a lot of time talking about this, that we as people who are supporting people want to look for opportunities that are strengths-based. We want to look at affirming, appreciating, validating, reinforcing, recognizing, and acknowledging any strengths and attributes that we see, successes, things that people are doing, because oftentimes we are working with people who, have a lot of barriers around maybe belonging to a racialized community, barriers around access. Maybe they've got struggles around a multitude of things. I know that we in our groups, we really try to use a lot more affirmations to really highlight and recognize and see people. So here's an example, an affirmation. You really have some great ideas for how you might make this change, or you really have some great ideas right now. Like, in our meeting together, wow, you came up, you really had some good ideas. Even coming in to see me today, we may want to affirm that. It took a lot to come and meet with a counselor. You showed a lot of strength in being able to set limits with your family member. So again, we're trying to affirm things that are connected to people's short-term and long-term goal. And then reflective listening. So these are also some pretty big OR skills. We want to use, simple reflections. So simple reflections, sometimes we're repeating what someone said. I think we noticed in the video, she said, wow, that like there's a lot of stress. Like we want reflections allow people to elaborate more. And so in MI, you're trying to use 3 reflections for every question you ask. I think we talked about these. So, complex reflections can help get at what people are not telling us. So sometimes, we make a guess to the unspoken, wow, that must have been like so painful to have that conversation with your family member. So we want to sort of get at the unspoken meaning that can really help people feel heard and seen and validated. We use a lot of metaphors. We run a number of groups that are for individuals that might be in their late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and we use a lot of metaphors. Really resonates for people. So a staff member, they like this metaphor. You feel like you're in a locked room. The key is somewhere in there with you, yet right now you can't find it. So it allows people to sort of visualize and make sense of how they're feeling. And again, we might use reflections to reflect feeling. And then the other one I just wanted to end on today is this, and then we'll go to question period, is this double-sided reflection. So in the double-sided reflection, we're using and DBT is very similar as well. We never use but, because but negates. If we say, you know, wow, like, you know, it's going to be really difficult to make those changes, but you're here now. That but sort of makes the first part less important. So we want to use and, because and allows both things to be held simultaneously. And when we're doing a double-sided reflection, we want to sort of keep the sustained talk as the first part and end with the change talk. So an example is, it's so easy and comfortable to sit on the couch and watch TV, watch YouTube, play video games. And at the same time, you really want to figure out how to be more active and work out. I'm just gonna stop. One second. There we go. So this was a lot. This is motivational interviewing in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you so much for that, April. I think that was really, really helpful, and a nice, quick and dirty look at motivational interviewing. So real quick, before we start our Q&A, I just wanted to run a quick poll for folks. I had a poll at the beginning that I forgot to launch, but we'll do this after poll. And I'm curious for folks, do you plan on using motivational interviewing in your practice after this webinar? All right, we're getting some answers. Already about halfway there, mostly lots of yeses. A couple not sures, that's okay. More answers coming in, we're about 75%. And I think that's about what we're gonna get. So I'm gonna end the poll here. So that's great. It looks like 97% of people are interested in using motivational interviewing in their practice after this webinar. So that's very exciting. Glad to hear it. Fantastic. I'll just share the results so everyone can see that 97% yes. Excellent. So with that, let's move on to our question and answer period. We already have a couple of questions here for April. So, some 3 questions already. That's fantastic. All right. So our first question here comes from Taylor, and Taylor asks, do you have any best practices to share in terms of charting and taking notes of a session with a client while also demonstrating active listening and engagement with the discussion?
Oh, what a great question. I know that's we have lots of conversations. Yeah, I mean, I think when the session is face to face, sometimes it might be just that my staff and I talk about like being really explicit with people, saying I really want to capture what's important in our conversation. It's really helpful for me to write down some points. Is that okay? Like, does that work for you? So I think, being really upfront and explaining why can again, really help with that partnership piece. Yeah, definitely. I think I encourage my staff to just name it, say, this actually really helps me focus. Like it allows, when I do some work with our DBT team. So, I tell clients when I'm in an individual session, like I will be looking down sometimes and just writing points because it helps me capture, some of the important parts of some of the important information that you're telling me, because I really want to get it. I really want to make sure that I'm understanding, and part of that understanding is being able to write it down. I know it's a little bit easier when if you're doing phone support or video support. I know some staff of mine will I guess typing notes is a little hard because sometimes people hear that typing, but they might be sort of jotting down some notes. But I would say just be really upfront.
Really helpful. Thanks, April. So our next question here is from Muriel, and Muriel asks, for those of us who are quite new to this technique, where would you recommend we seek further information /training/resources to learn more?
Yeah, great question. I'll send Emily, I'll send a resource list for you. I mean,
Fantastic.
yeah, there's a ton of videos on YouTube that especially from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health that do little snippets of some of the skills that I think are really helpful. And then, I mean, yeah, I'll send out some training places that offer some motivational interviewing, and feel free to. I did put my email address in the chat. Like if you want some specific information, we use some workbooks with the clients we're working with, and I know they've got a workbook like for younger people. Feel free to reach out as well.
Awesome. That actually answers one of the other questions that we had. Somebody was wondering if they can connect with you by email
Sure.
or otherwise with questions. So that's good to know. Awesome. The next question is from Jessica, and Jessica asks, have you done motivational interviewing work in group settings as opposed to one-on-one, and which aspects of MI would change in a group context?
Great question. Definitely. Yeah, we are the programming that the program I oversee runs is we do a lot of groups. So we really, we sort of use a lot of affirmations. So a lot of like affirmations. We use reflections. And we try to sort of be aware of that writing reflux, but a lot of affirmations, like really, and a lot of commitment strategies. So one of the commitment strategies we use in our groups is we affirm, we affirm, like, it's great that you all came today, like that, that's like, even though that feels like a baby step, that's a step that you're taking to make changes, and that step matters. We do that, and then at the end of the group, we ask people to give us a thumbs up about whether they're going to do the homework. We ask people to give us the thumbs up about whether they're going to come next week. So we look for some opportunities to really sort of involve people and sort of strengthen that commitment. And we also look at sort of affirming when people are developing some mastery. So, in some of our groups, someone might say, "Oh, I did this," and they might say, like, they might. So I'll give you an example. I covered for staff yesterday in a cannabis skills group. And someone was like, I relapsed and it was really overwhelming. And, just before the group today, I took a walk and I decided not to walk past a cannabis store. And they sort of left it there. And then myself and the other facilitator really highlighted that piece, that person is taking steps to build some mastery around being more cautious, like being more mindful around where they're walking, and they did it before group and they came to group. So even though a relapse happened, which is sustained, here they are, like, going for a walk, doing it purposely, attending group, and that's the change. We use a lot of double-sided reflections. And like DBT, they call it devil's advocate. MI calls it arguing the other side. Sometimes when we're working with people, we have them argue the other side, because oftentimes, when we're working with people, we're the champions of change, right? Which is helpful, but sometimes, it really shocks people when we sort of go the other way. So, say if I was working with Emily and she, she was telling me, like, oh, I relapsed, like everything's lost. And then, I sort of offered some reflections and I wasn't hearing a lot of movement. I might say, wow, Emily, you're right. Like it looks like, maybe you've come to a dead end. Like maybe. And often, and so what that does is it gets, sometimes, I mean, you have to do it with intention, but oftentimes it'll have Emily argue the other side. No, April, like, no, I came to group, like I'm trying, like I really want to. And so then we strengthen that, because we want people to talk more about change than we are. Because the more, Miller says, if we want people to literally talk themselves into change. The more we echo change, the more based on research is that we are going to change.
Yes, that was so helpful. That was really great. All right, so we have another question here from Natalie, and Natalie's asking, I definitely incorporate the spirit of motivational interviewing into my interactions. However, struggled with specific techniques and statements. What type of statements might be helpful to start with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Natalie, I would I would look at those or skills, like trying to, that's great. And Miller and Rolnick would say the spirit really is like the structure of MI. Like when we're working in the spirit of MI, we're building a solid structure. So I would just sort of slowly try to ask more open-ended questions and try to use some more reflections, where instead of, and again, the difference between a reflection and a question sometimes is in the intonation. We might say, well, that sounds really stressful, instead of, whoa, that was really stressful. And we want to watch the intonation. Reflections we sort of keep it more level and just at going back, and the unspoken piece. I think, when we get feedback from individuals based on their interactions with staff, some of the feedback highlights, when staff, go at that unspoken piece, like really take a stab at if I was working with Emily, what Emily's not telling me. So maybe she's saying like, yeah, I've got weekend plans and everything's going to be okay. And I'm noticing that she's, her face looks a little overwhelmed. And I might say, and there's some things that you're worried about. And it looks like, maybe you're having some thoughts that are causing some stress. That can really help people feel like, oh, this person gets me. This person wants to get me. And we can get it wrong. I've gotten it wrong so many times.
Awesome. Great. That was so helpful. Thank you so much. So it looks like we're out of questions, which is great because it's 10:58. So that's perfect timing. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for bringing your expertise to this webinar today, April. It was really fantastic to have you. I'm sure that everyone here learned so much. Thank you as well to our audience. Thank you all for joining us here today. It's always nice to have your feedback and your questions and your insights in the chat. So thank you for joining us. We're going to be off for July and August, so no webinars in July and August, but our next webinar is going to be in September, on September 8th, and that's going to be on accessibility and accommodations to highlight our new accessibility and accommodations toolkit that will be coming out later this summer.
I just wanted to say too, like everyone showed up on a long weekend Friday, like that speaks volumes about your commitment around being more effective and being more client-centered.
Amen. Thank you so much for saying that, April. So true. Thank you so much, everyone. Please check out our website, campusmentalhealth.ca, for more resources, tools, tips, webinars, info sheets, toolkits, whatever you may need. And also don't forget to check out morefeetontheground.ca for a free online course on how to respond, reflect, refer, and recognize the signs that someone needs some support. The last thing I'll say is please everyone take a moment to check out the survey that will pop up when you close this window. It helps us a lot with our future webinars. With that, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Great long weekend, everyone.
Bye.